My wife cheated with my son's best friend and called me paranoid. So I gathered proof, exposed her at school, saw her arrested, and ended the marriage. Jordan's body wasn't moving, not a twitch, not a sound. Ethan knelt in the sand, heart hammering, hands trembling as he tilted the boy's chin and pressed his mouth to his. Inhale, exhale, press. 1, 2, 3. Jordan didn't breathe. Ethan tried again. His jaw clenched, his chest burned. "Come on," Ethan growled under his breath. "Breathe, you little bastard." He wanted to scream, to walk away, to let it happen, but he couldn't. He had to save his son's best friend and his wife's lover. Ethan had always prided himself on being a man who saw things clearly, a numbers guy, cold and logical. At 57, he had built a life of discipline, from his successful career in investments to the sleek, modern house he bought for his family. He had a beautiful wife, Vivian, whom he had adored for 23 years. She was different from him, loud, warm, a woman who commanded every room she walked into, a woman who never heard no without laughing it off like a joke. Maybe that was what had attracted him to her in the first place. Maybe that was what was going to destroy him now. Ethan stirred awake, the room thick with silence. Something was wrong. He reached across the bed, searching for warmth. Nothing. His fingers brushed over the cold, empty sheets where Vivian should have been. Sitting up, he glanced at the dim glow of the clock on the nightstand. Past midnight, the house was still, except for the faint hum of the central air. Ethan got out of bed, throwing on a t-shirt before making his way downstairs. Maybe she was watching TV. Maybe she couldn't sleep. But as he stepped into the dim hallway, he heard it, a voice, low, hushed in the kitchen. He froze, muscles tense. Vivian's voice, careful, playful, it was incredible. "I want to do it again." A sharp pulse of unease ran through him. "You're so good, so hot." The words twisted his stomach into knots. He stepped into the doorway. "Who are you talking to?" Vivian jumped, spinning toward him, her phone still pressed to her ear. For a split second, something flashed across her face, guilt, panic, but it disappeared just as quickly. She sighed, ending the call abruptly. "Ethan," she said, placing a hand on her hip, exhaling as if he had inconvenienced her. "You scared me." "Who was that?" Ethan asked. "Elysia," she replied, the name sliding off her tongue effortlessly. "We were talking about a guy we saw in a movie earlier. Relax." Ethan studied her carefully. "You said you're hot." Vivian's lips curved slightly. She let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. "Oh my God, Ethan. Honey, your hearing's been bad for months now. Are you really sure you heard what you think you did?" The words hit harder than he expected. Ethan wondered if maybe he had misheard. Her tone shifted, laced with irritation. "I don't like you tailing me like some jealous kid with these dumb accusations. Real cute. You know, honey, maybe you ought to rethink that hearing treatment of yours since, well, you ain't quite right these days." She sighed and patted his chest lightly. "Go back to bed, Ethan." With that, she turned and walked past him, leaving him standing in the dark kitchen, her perfume lingering in the air. Ethan couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. Maybe he'd been too quick to accuse Vivian. Her reaction had been immediate, sharp, offended, the way anyone would react to an unfair accusation. Maybe he really had misheard. His hearing had gotten worse over the past 2 months, something he hated admitting even to himself. That morning, he sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through their phone records, just checking the usual bills for errors. But then, something caught his eye. 50 calls to the same number in a month. Just then, Aiden, his son, walked into the kitchen, still groggy from sleep. "Hey," Ethan said, keeping his voice casual. "You know this number?" He turned the screen toward his son. Aiden rubbed his eyes, leaned in for a better look. "Yeah, that's Jordan's number." Ethan felt a cold prickle run down his spine, his son's best friend. Aiden frowned. "But I haven't called him that much." Ethan exhaled slowly. That only left one person. Vivian, his wife, had called their son's best friend 50 times in a month. Why? Vivian was on her morning run. By the time she returned, flushed and breathless, Ethan had already rehearsed the conversation in his head a dozen times. She barely glanced at him as she grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, stretching out her legs. "Good run?" he asked, keeping his tone light. She muttered between sips. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Hey, I was looking at the phone bill this morning." Vivian gave him a look, unimpressed. "And you called Jordan's number 50 times last month." That got her attention. She lowered the bottle, frowning. "What? 50 calls?" she repeated. "You sure you weren't trying to reach him?" Ethan asked. She rolled her eyes and let out a dry laugh. "Oh my God, Ethan. Jordan's been asking about college, about career paths. He's overwhelmed, and I've been helping. I'm a school counselor, Ethan. You really think I'd risk everything for a fling with a teenager? I told you he asked for help." Ethan hesitated. Had she? Maybe. But she was already on the attack. Jesus, Ethan, this again? She tossed the empty bottle into the sink with a clatter. You don't hear things right anymore. And now you're playing detective with phone bills. What's next? Are you going to start tracking my car? That's not what I'm saying, Ethan said. No, because it sure sounds like you're calling me a liar again. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. This is because of your hearing, Ethan. Because you won't admit how bad it's gotten. But it's not just that, is it? You're paranoid, just like... She clamped her mouth shut, but the damage was done. Ethan's chest tightened. Say it, he said quietly. She crossed her arms, her breath still heavy from the run. You're losing it, just like your father. The words sank deep, ice cold and absolute. His father, who had spent his last years locked away, whispering to shadows that weren't there. Ethan swallowed, looking down at the table. Maybe she was right. That day, Aiden invited Jordan over to work on his bike in the garage. The two boys spent hours grease covering their hands. Eventually, Aiden got up, stretching. I need a shower, man. Be right back. Jordan wiped his hands on an old rag and nodded. Yeah, sure. Ethan got home from work a little later, stepping inside with a sigh. Something was off. Too quiet. The house should have had the low hum of a TV or Aiden's music from his room, but instead, nothing. He checked the driveway, Vivian's car, Jordan's too. He walked upstairs, his pulse picking up. The shower was running. Aiden? Vivian? No answer. The hallway was dim, shadows stretching unnaturally under the glow of the bathroom light. A strange, unsettled feeling gnawed at Ethan's gut as he stepped toward Aiden's room. He pushed the door open and froze. Vivian and Jordan sat on the bed, too close. The space between them barely existed, her legs tucked beneath her, his knee almost touching hers. Flushed cheeks, hair tousled, breathless. For a moment, no one moved. Vivian's head snapped toward him, eyes widening before narrowing into something colder. Jesus, Ethan, she exhaled, too quick, too forced. Ethan's fingers curled at his sides. Hi, Jordan. Everything okay? Where's Aiden? Vivian laughed, but it was too fast, too fake. We were just talking. Aiden's taking a shower. Jordan looked anywhere but at Ethan, the tips of his ears red. Ethan's jaw clenched, his gut screamed at him. This wasn't nothing. Vivian stood, smoothing her shirt as if dismissing the whole thing. You really need to get that paranoia checked. Maybe talk to someone. She brushed past him, heading for the hallway. Jordan followed a second later, keeping his head down. Ethan didn't want to believe there was something between these two. It would be unnatural, too much. That night still rattled. He made a decision. He wanted to save his family. I booked us a weekend at the lake, he told her, as they got ready for bed. Just a family vacation. Vivian exhaled, the anger from earlier already gone. She reached out, touching his arm. That sounds perfect. It was the least he could do. After all, she had put up with so much. The morning of their departure, the suitcases were packed in the trunk. The car was idling in the driveway, and Ethan was about to slide into the driver's seat when he heard an extra set of footsteps crunching on the gravel. He turned, and there he was, Jordan. The boy stood next to Vivian, a backpack slung over one shoulder, looking slightly uncomfortable but not too uncomfortable. Ethan froze, caught off guard by his presence. Jordan, he said after a second. What are you doing here? Mrs. Callahan invited me, Jordan replied, flashing a wide smile. Ethan's gaze flicked to Vivian, who had the nerve to act like this was completely normal, like it wasn't worth mentioning until they were literally leaving. Ethan inhaled through his nose, forcing his voice to stay level. Vivian, can I talk to you for a second? She flashed a quick smile at Jordan. Go ahead and get in, sweetheart. We'll be right there. As soon as the car door shut, Ethan pulled her a few steps away. What the hell is going on here? His voice was low, controlled, but laced with frustration. Vivian sighed. Ethan? No, don't Ethan me. When exactly were you going to mention that our weekend away suddenly includes him? She crossed her arms, looking completely unbothered. I told you his parents can't afford a trip like this. I thought it would be a nice thing to do. And you decided this when? Ethan asked. She tilted her head. Does it matter? Ethan let out a slow breath, staring at her. It matters. It matters because you knew I'd say no, and you did it anyway. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He could already feel it. This weekend was going to be anything but relaxing. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to swallow the frustration rising in his throat. Fine, he said finally, his voice tight. But inside, something was shifting. Something wasn't right. The lake was quiet, the water smooth like glass, a perfect place to unwind. Or at least it should have been. But Ethan couldn't shake the tension coiling in his gut. He didn't want to believe it, not really. But it was there, the little things. The way she laughed softer around Jordan. The way Jordan stood too close. The way conversations would fall silent the second Ethan walked in. Still, maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was just reading into things again. Later that day, as he dug through their suitcase looking for his charger, his hand brushed against something unfamiliar. He pulled it out. A bikini, but not just any bikini. Thin straps, barely their fabric, the kind of thing she hadn't worn in years, especially not on a so-called family trip. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as he stormed out of the cabin, the scrap of fabric clenched in his fist. He didn't care. What the hell is going on here? He threw the bikini onto the wooden table beside her. Vivian blinked, then frowned. It's a swimsuit. No kidding. And why exactly are you bringing something like this on a trip to the middle of the woods? Her eyes flashed with irritation. Are you serious right now? Dead serious, Vivian. His voice was sharp, edged with something dangerous. What am I supposed to think, Vivian? I see how you act around Jordan. The laughing, the touching, the little secret conversations, and now this. She scoffed, standing abruptly, the firelight catching in her furious eyes. Oh my God, Ethan, you're sick. You know that? Absolutely sick. She threw her hands up. I bought this swimsuit for you so you'd actually notice me. He stared at her, breathing hard. This isn't about Jordan, it's about you. Your paranoia, your constant suspicion. You hear things that aren't there. You see things that don't exist, and now you're accusing me of what exactly? Dressing too sexy for you? She shook her head, lips pressed into a furious line. Vivian ran a hand through her hair, like she was already over this conversation, like Ethan was just an inconvenience to be managed. Maybe take a walk, Ethan. Clear your head like you always do when you're cornered. And for God's sake, get your paranoia in check. She turned, brushing past him. Ethan stayed behind. The steady hum of the saw filled the air as Aiden worked, slicing through a log with slow, practiced movements. Sweat clung to his shirt despite the cool evening breeze. He barely looked up when Jordan strolled over, hands in his pockets, an amused smirk on his face. What's up with your parents? Jordan asked casually, nodding toward the cabin. They were yelling pretty loud back there. Aiden exhaled, shaking his head. It happens. Jordan chuckled, pulling out his phone. Yeah, but I think I know why. Aiden finally set the saw down, frowning. What do you mean? Jordan's grin widened. Check this out. He tapped his screen and turned the phone toward Aiden. The video started playing. Vivian, his mother, standing in a dimly lit room, her back to the camera. She was laughing, her voice slightly slurred. Jordan's voice could be heard in the background. Come on, Mrs. Callahan, take it off. And she did. Aiden's breath caught in his throat as she swayed her hips, slipping out of her dress, revealing smooth, bare skin underneath. The music was low, sultry. She turned, running a hand through her hair, biting her lip as she moved, dancing, teasing, completely oblivious to the fact that she was being recorded. Aiden's vision blurred, heat rushing to his face, his stomach twisted, his hands clenched. What the hell, man? His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. What the hell is going on here? Jordan grinned, amused by his reaction. Relax. The whole school's already seen it. The world tilted. The ringing in Aiden's ears drowned out everything else, and then he moved. His fist connected with Jordan's jaw before he even realized what he was doing. The phone tumbled to the ground as Jordan staggered back, stunned. But Aiden wasn't done, not even close. Ethan sat in the middle of the lake, gripping his fishing rod, his pulse still thrumming from the fight with Vivian. The quiet lapping of the water should have calmed him, but his thoughts were tangled, dark. He needed this, needed space, needed to breathe. Then, shouts. His head snapped up. On the shore, two figures thrashed violently in the sand, fists flying. Aiden, Jordan. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Jordan swung, but Aiden tackled him hard, driving them both to the ground. They rolled toward the water's edge, kicking up dirt and gravel. Then, suddenly, a splash. Ethan's heart stopped. Jordan was in the water, arms flailing. But Aiden wasn't letting go. No, he was holding him down. A sickening wave of realization crashed over Ethan. His son was trying to drown him. Jesus Christ, Ethan muttered. He dropped his rod, seized the oars, and rowed harder than he ever had in his life. Each stroke burned, the boat cutting through the water like a blade. On shore, Jordan's movements grew weaker. Aiden was still pressing down, his face twisted with fury. Ethan reached them just in time. He dove in, the shock of the cold barely registering, and ripped Aiden off Jordan, shoving him back. Jordan's body was limp, his face pale, his lips blue. Ethan didn't think, he just acted. Dragging the boy onto the shore, he tilted his chin, sealed his lips over Jordan's, and started CPR. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Nothing, again. Breathe. A cough, then another. Jordan's body jerked, water sputtering from his mouth. He gasped, sucking in air like a newborn. People had gathered, footsteps pounding against the dock, voices sharp and panicked. Someone yelled, "The cops are on their way." Ethan spun on Aiden, his breath ragged, his hands shaking. "Are you out of your damn mind?" he roared. "What the hell were you thinking?" Aiden just stood there, chest heaving, eyes burning with something Ethan didn't recognize, something raw and broken. Then Vivian burst through the crowd, hair wild, eyes frantic. But she wasn't looking at Aiden, she was running to Jordan. She fell to her knees beside him, hands cupping his face. "Oh my God, baby, are you okay?" Her voice trembled, thick with emotion. Ethan felt the world shift. Baby. Not Jordan. Baby. Aiden looked at him then, his fists still clenched, his body trembling with rage. And Ethan knew he had missed something huge. Ethan drove in silence, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. A highway stretched out before him, dark and empty. The only sound was the steady hum of the engine. His mind raced, turning over every detail, every moment, every glance between Vivian and Jordan that he had dismissed as paranoia. Vivian had taken Jordan home after the incident. That was hours ago. She hadn't called, hadn't texted. And now, as Ethan replayed everything in his mind, the puzzle pieces snapped together with terrifying clarity. The little touches, the hushed conversations, the way she defended him, the bikini, Jesus, his wife and his son's best friend. His stomach twisted violently. By the time he pulled into the police station, his head was pounding. He signed the release papers with a hand that felt disconnected from his body, barely registering the officer's words before they brought Aiden out. His son's face was blank, his jaw set. Not a word was exchanged as they walked to the truck. They drove in silence for miles. The air inside the car was thick, suffocating. Then, suddenly, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He pulled onto the shoulder of the road, gravel crunching beneath the tires, and threw the truck into park. Aiden's head snapped toward him. "What?" Ethan turned, his voice cold and sharp. "Why did you fight him?" Aiden's mouth pressed into a hard line. He stared straight ahead. Ethan exhaled through his nose, gripping the wheel before letting go. His voice dropped lower. "You found out, didn't you?" Aiden didn't move. Ethan swallowed, forcing himself to say it aloud. "That he and your mother..." Aiden's shoulders tensed, his breath hitched. Then, just like that, he broke. A choked sob tore from his throat as he pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, his whole body shaking. Ethan felt something inside him shatter. So, it was true. The truth sat between them, dark and undeniable. There was no taking it back. No pretending he hadn't seen the way Aiden crumbled under the weight of it. His wife, his son's best friend. Ethan stared at the dark road ahead, his breath slow and controlled. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet. "We're going home." Vivian returned home late, slipping through the door as if she could go unnoticed. The house was dark except for the dim glow of the kitchen light. Ethan sat at the table, a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him. He didn't look up. She hesitated in the doorway. "You're still up?" He swirled the glass in his hand, watching the amber liquid move. "Yeah." Vivian exhaled softly, rubbing her arms like she was cold. "Aiden asleep?" He nodded, lingering as if expecting him to say something more. But Ethan didn't give her that satisfaction. He just took another slow sip of his drink. She sighed. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed." And with that, she disappeared down the hall. Ethan didn't follow, didn't stop her, didn't ask a damn thing because now he had a plan. The next morning, while Vivian was in the shower, Ethan stepped into the garage. His movements were quick, precise, devoid of hesitation. The small recording device was secured beneath the dashboard of her car. Then came the cameras, one in the garage, one in the house, small, undetectable. All he had to do now was wait, and he didn't have to wait long. Within days, the truth started bleeding through the cracks. First, snippets of whispered conversations in the car, soft giggles, then Jordan's voice, "I miss you." Vivian's low murmur followed, almost affectionate, "Just be patient, baby." Ethan's stomach burned, but he forced himself to keep going. The final confirmation came in the form of video footage from the security cameras. He went through the footage like a man possessed, clicking through the nights Jordan had stayed over. And then there it was, 1:15 a.m. Vivian, creeping down the hallway. 1:17 stopping at Jordan's door, knocking. 1:20 the door cracking open just enough to pull her inside. She didn't come out until nearly 3 in the morning. Ethan stared at the screen, heart hammering, bile rising in his throat. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't paranoid. He was just a fool. Now there was no doubt, no excuses. She thought she was untouchable, that he would break. crumble under the weight of betrayal. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Ethan exhaled slowly, controlled. Let the game begin. Ethan sat in the living room, staring blankly at the flickering glow of the TV, though he wasn't watching. His mind was elsewhere, calculating, planning. The evidence was piling up. He had her. Then Vivian walked in. Her expression was different tonight. Guarded but not defensive, almost nervous. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quieter than usual. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Go ahead." She hesitated, then stepped closer, wringing her hands. "I wasn't sure how to tell you." His jaw tightened. He already knew where this was going. Another lie, another excuse, another pathetic attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Ethan kept his expression calm, unreadable. He didn't flinch, didn't react, just sat there waiting. Vivian exhaled as if working up the courage to say something big. She gave him a small, tentative smile. "I found out today," she said softly. "I'm pregnant." Ethan blinked once, then leaned back slightly as if processing. "Yeah?" She nodded quickly, searching his face for a reaction. 3 weeks. She let out a nervous little laugh. "Crazy, right? I mean, it's early, but I wanted you to know." Ethan let a slow smile curve at the corner of his lips. He tilted his head slightly as if letting it sink in. "That's big news." Vivian's shoulders relaxed, relief flashing in her eyes. "Yeah," she breathed. "It is." And in that moment she had no idea. No idea that the man sitting across from her already knew, already had everything. The next week, the gymnasium was alive with chatter, applause, and polite laughter as parents mingled, celebrating the students' achievements. Ethan barely heard any of it. Across the room, Vivian looked radiant, laughing at something a fellow teacher said, one hand on her belly, like she was carrying his child, like she was still his wife. She had no idea what was coming. Ethan stood. "I won't take much of your time," he said, his voice calm, almost casual, "but there's something that needs to be said." The room hushed, heads turned. Vivian's smile froze. Ethan let the silence stretch, let the weight of the moment press down before turning his gaze to her. "We trust the people who guide our children," he said evenly. "We assume they have their best interests at heart. We believe in their integrity." He exhaled, shaking his head. "But sometimes that trust is misplaced. A flicker of movement." Vivian shifted in her seat, her jaw tightening. The energy in the room changed. "Vivian Callahan, my wife, is more than just my partner. She's also a school counselor." His voice didn't waver. Someone students turned to for guidance, for support. His eyes swept over the crowd. And yet, she chose to betray that trust. The murmur started, soft and disbelieving. Vivian's breath caught. "Ethan, stop." But he didn't. "She has been having an affair." His voice was quiet but razor sharp. Not just an affair, but with someone much younger, someone who should have been off limits. Gasps, a sharp collective intake of breath. Jordan's mother stood up slowly, her hand gripping the back of a folding chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her face had gone pale, then red. "You lying fraud," she snapped, her voice slicing through the gym like a blade. Heads turned. The room fell into a stunned silence. Vivian's eyes widened. "Melanie!" But Melanie was already moving, fury radiating from her with every step. "My son, my boy," she growled. "He trusted you. We all did. You manipulative, pathetic excuse for a role model." Vivian stood up quickly, her face draining of color. "I didn't. This isn't what you think." "Don't give me that bullshit," Melanie spat, standing toe-to-toe with her now. The crowd parted, too stunned to intervene, too riveted to look away. Then it happened. Melanie shoved her. Not hard, but hard enough. Vivian staggered, heels slipping on the gym floor. Her hand shot out and caught Melanie's shoulder. For a second, it looked like she was steadying herself. She wasn't. She shoved back, hard. The women collided, arms flailing, grabbing at hair, clothing, whatever they could get. Chairs clattered. A folding table tipped over. Someone screamed. Melanie swung first, a wide slap that landed with a sickening crack across Vivian's cheek. Vivian lurched forward, grabbing at Melanie's blouse and yanking. Buttons flew. They hit the floor, rolling, hands clawing, fists landing in wild, furious bursts. Parents rushed forward. A teacher tried to wedge herself between them but got knocked sideways. Another man from the audience finally managed to pull Melanie off, while 2 others dragged Vivian to her feet. Both women were panting, eyes wild, hair a mess. Blood smeared the corner of Vivian's mouth. Melanie's earring was missing. The crowd was stunned. Jordan stood frozen, white as a ghost. Aiden looked away, jaw tight. Then sirens, distant at first, then louder. The gym doors burst open. Uniformed officers swept in, weapons holstered but ready, their voices sharp. "Back, everyone, back," one of them shouted. An officer stepped directly toward Vivian. "Mrs. Callahan." Vivian turned, disoriented, bruised, but still defiant. "What is this?" she asked, trying to straighten her shirt. "This is insane. You need to come with us," the officer said firmly. Melanie was still breathing hard, held back now by a teacher, mascara streaking down her cheek, but her voice was steady. "Arrest her. She doesn't belong anywhere near children." Vivian's voice cracked. "Ethan, say something." Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Then, finally, his voice came, low and even. "You should have said no back when it still mattered." And with that, they cuffed her, and the whole gym watched as Vivian Callahan was led away in handcuffs, her secrets laid bare under the brightest lights. Ethan ignored the first few calls, then the next. But Vivian kept trying, through the lawyer, through Aiden, even through a mutual friend. Then came the letter, short, desperate. "Please just come see me one time. I need to talk to you." So he did. Now, sitting across from her in the prison visiting room, he felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. Vivian picked up the phone on her side of the glass, her hands shaking. "Ethan, thank you for coming." He didn't respond, just watched her. Tears welled in her eyes. "You have to get me out of here. Call a lawyer. A good one, the best one. Whatever it costs, I'll pay you back, I swear." Ethan exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "Is that so?" She nodded frantically. "I'm carrying your child. Our child." For a moment he just stared at her. Then, slowly, a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Viv," he said, shaking his head. "I may be losing my hearing, but I sure as hell haven't lost my damn mind." Her face flickered with confusion, then panic. "Ethan, what?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "I was out of town for 2 weeks, remember? Business trip. Right when you supposedly got pregnant. And after I got back, we never touched each other. Not once. You weren't interested in me, you were too busy screwing a kid." Vivian's breath hitched. She blinked rapidly, scrambling. "No, Ethan. Listen, I love you. I messed up, I know, but I need you. I need your help. Please don't leave me here." Ethan just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Her voice cracked. "You're my husband." He exhaled, like he was shaking off the last bit of weight she had on him. Then, slowly, he stood up, adjusting his jacket. "You stopped being my wife the moment you chose him." Her hand slammed against the glass. Ethan, don't you walk away from me." But he already had, and this time he wasn't coming back.